All right, I'd like to welcome you to this week's report. As you can tell by the wind that's been blowing outside all week, the weather forecast was right, and it was definitely a windy week here in Southern California. Good news is we've got some better weather coming into forecast in most areas, and the wind we did get didn't hurt the fishing too bad so far. So let's go to the map here. So the Channel Islands definitely got the most wind, along with Nick, and Clemente a little bit less, but it really blew up there, and it's going to blow on those outer areas, and all areas for that matter, through Friday night. There's going to be 30 knots of wind Friday afternoon. Based on the amount of wind we've had so far, it didn't really affect the fishing, so I'm not sure that this additional bit of wind on Friday will. But by Saturday into Sunday, it's getting nicer, and then we have really good weather throughout the Southern California Bight all next week. There's a little bit of wind up at the Channel Islands, but nothing really to write home about. Now, as far as water temperatures go, the big concern was all this wind would really mess things up, and it did in some areas, but it surprisingly did not in others. Hardest hit was the northern Channel Islands, Miguel, Rosa, the front side of Santa Cruz Island. All that stuff dropped dramatically. They're down in the low 50s in some of those areas. Backside of Santa Cruz and the Lee didn't get hit too hard. Water temps still look okay in there. Clemente, Catalina, water temps are good. Coronados, Tuna Grounds, all those areas, they held up pretty well. The spots that got hit were the other than Channel Islands, the coast above Newport, Long Beach, Ray Del Rey, Ventura Coast, all that stuff got hit pretty hard. Water temp down in the 50s in those areas. South of Newport, there's some patchy clouds on the current SST, so it's hard to be exactly sure, but it looks like the water there is fine. That area down there is less prone to wind wave driven rollovers and upwelling, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And the places that did get hit hard should recover over the next week here without any significant wind happening. So let's take it up to the Channel Islands. Not much coverage up there, but the boats that got out did catch some sea bass. Cobra went out, got like a 60-pounder, I think on Easter, the day before Easter. These guys are fishing in pretty rough weather up there, but are making the crossings. I guess where they're biting is probably not too bad, but they're getting fish up there on squid, and that should improve as the weather improves and stabilizes up there for sure. The rock fishing, boats up there have been fishing the coast, so it's been not as good as it is at the islands, but they're still catching plenty of fish. They'll be back at the islands by this weekend, I'm sure. And other than a couple of days where there's some wind, next week it shouldn't be a problem getting out there at all. No one's really been at Nick or the Dirt Clod at all. It's just been too windy to go out there. At San Clemente Island, earlier this week, the Freedom got into some nice sized yellows there on the backside, east end. They're fishing squid. These fish are, high teens to high 30s. Just a nice 20-pound average, 25-pound average grade of fish. Like I said, they're biting squid. They're losing a lot of fish. Guys aren't geared up right for them. They're hooking a bunch of fish at once when they come through. Tangles, everything else that's kind of messing that up. That bite dried up after the first hit on them, but it looks to me like a squid zone bite, so maybe that squid moved out into deeper water. Maybe they just need to relocate that. Get some good weather over there for a few days, get those boats looking around again. I'm sure they'll relocate those fish. It's not like they left. Catalina is actually pretty good for the boats that have been getting out. The sport boats getting out there, it's mostly the Pursuit and the Native Sun that have been running out there. They're catching a few yellows, bonita, bass, rockfish, stuff like that. It's decent fishing, and I think once this wind lays down, it's just going to keep improving. There's Seabass biting there. The Bight sport fishing has just been on him. I think he has like 50 or 60 fish already this season, and I assume that a bunch of them are coming from Catalina, but he's got some open spots, I think, for a trip this weekend. They might be full by the time you see this, but if you want to get a chance at one of those big sea bass they've been getting, they're getting 50, 60 pounders out there some days. I would check out their website, Bight Sport Fishing, or look them up on Instagram, see if they got any spots open. Definitely a good time to do it. There's not a whole lot else going on that you can get that great a fish. So anyway, along the coast, it sucks. My friend Tom Troop drove all the way up from San Diego earlier, I think on Monday, maybe Saturday, to go fish Long Beach, and he didn't do so hot. And he was wondering if I was going to talk about this, but it's the water temp rolled up there big time. You know, it's a full moon, which is not good for bass fishing this last weekend anyway. And then I saw he had put a little video up where he was driving out of the harbor, and I could see his fish finder. It looked like it was like 56-degree water, which is, I think, 7, maybe 8 degrees off from where it was before this wind along the beach. So that's just cold, dirty, gross water there, and it'll rebound, and the fish will start biting again as we come off the moon. And I just would skip it for now. You know, it's nothing to write home about. Down the coast at the Coronados, we're kind of back into a cycle where they're seeing fish and they're not really biting with these yellowtail. San Diego to Liberty, the Grande, those boats are down there all the time, and they're seeing more than they're catching. It sounds like they get a little weather window or a little bite window that they have each day when these fish actually bite. And you know, I don't know if that's just going to be the way they are all season down there. I mean, it's how it used to be. So this is kind of trending in that direction. But hopefully it's just a little down cycle and they'll be right back to where they were before. But there's no shortage of fish, and you know, if you get down there on the right day, you just got to go. So might get lucky. Now that we're getting into off the lunar cycle, this wind will lay down. Whatever bite there is down there hopefully will stabilize, and these guys will get back on bigger scores. The fish offshore, they're still way down in Mexico for the most part, and I still not way down. They're out of skiff range and weather. There are some fish within skiff range, but I think it's pretty hit and miss out there. And with the weather the way it's been even on a nice day, it's not been really skiff friendly. And a lot of these fish are coming off of sonar schools and stuff. And if you're out there on your own boat, you're gonna have trouble finding them. So you're better off, you want to go catch a bluefin right now, you jump on an overnight trip, day and a half, day and 3/4, whatever. Because a lot of these bites are coming at night. And it's nice to get down there into the bite zone before it gets light, which you would on on your own boat. And at night, a lot of these fish are coming on the knife jigs and the flat fall style jigs, for lack of a better term, slow pitch jigs, things like that. During the day, they're catching them on fly line sinker rigs and the smaller slow pitch jigs. So if you're heading down, I'd have a fly line rod, a sinker rig rod, and a couple of different size rods you can fish a jig with. And that should cover all your bases right now, basically. But I asked Joey Shimizu over at Taddy to send me some jigs so I could talk a little bit about the jigging for these bluefin tuna. And while I don't currently do a lot of it, I haven't done any of it in recent times. I used to do a lot of this in Mexico and when I go down to Costa Rica, things like that. So I'm familiar with the technique. And what it comes down to is you're dropping a jig. There's a slow pitch style, and there's a more classic knife jig style. The slow pitch is designed to have a very erratic fluttering motion on the way down. The knife jig style, or this is a hybrid made by Taddy, which kind of has a little bit of both, is designed to have a pitching style on the way down, but it also has a little bit of action on the way up. So if you do the classic Japanese style of jigging with it, you can get bites on the retrieve too. And while they're not doing a lot of it down here in San Diego, if you're going to invest in this stuff, I'd watch a couple of videos and see how these guys are retrieving those jigs. Because if it's during a daytime bite and it's slow, using that technique with the actual jigging of it, where you're jerking your rod and retrieving line, can get you bit when other guys are not getting bit just on dropping the bait and winding it back up. So before I get any more into the jigs here, I want to talk about tackle you're going to want to use. A couple weeks ago I showed you this yo-yo rod that I use for yellowtail. This would be the same thing I would use for bluefin up to 100 pounds. Anything above that with jigging, you're going to want to use like an International 30 or a big Calico and a rail rod. If you don't have that, you can rent it at the landing and they'll get you all set up. This is a Penn Fathom 40 narrow 2-speed. Same Rain Shadow RCJB 84XH 7-foot, 40 to 80 pound jig stick. It's graphic composite. Real heavy rod, stout setup. If I was fishing on a sport boat, I would fill this thing to the brim with white Spectra, probably 80 pound. And if not white, high-vis yellow. And the reason you want to do that is because you're going to want to mark your line so that you know the depth you're fishing at. When I talked about yellowtail, I talked about dropping down to the bottom, knowing how many feet you're getting per crank to know where your jig is in the water column. When you're fishing bluefin, there's no way to drop to the bottom because you're in 3,000 feet of water sometimes or more. So what I would do, and what I have done in the past when doing this type of thing, is I will mark my line. So I know if I grab the end of my line and stretch it out like this, that's 6 feet for me, or a fathom. So I'll do that 10 times and I'll get a black or red marker and mark the Spectra, a little section about 1 inch long. With that, do it again, mark it again. So now I have marks at 60 foot, 120 foot, 180 foot, 240, 300, 360, 420, 480 foot. I don't think you need any further than that or even that far. But that extra line is good. The extra measurement is good to have in case you get in a tangle or you get loose in line. You still have further marks. Now, when you pull up on a school and the captain says, hey, I'm marking fish at 150 feet to 200 feet, you know, okay, so I'm going to let 2 of these marks go out, albeit 120 feet. And if I let 2 more go down, that's 240 feet. And so basically I can fish, keep my action between the second mark and the 5th mark on my line coming onto my reel, and that entire time I will have my jig in front of those fish that are at that depth. A lot of guys just drop down and are like, okay, I'm going to see if I get a bite. No, boom, I'm down a quarter spool. I'm down 600, 700 feet. And so that's 700 feet down, 600 feet down, 600 feet back up. That's 1,200 feet. And there's only 150 feet of fish in the column. So you go through them twice. So 300 out of 1,200, you're 75% of the time your jig is not in front of fish. So mark where, hey, I know their depth. I know how much line I have out so you drop down to where you get to and that's the point here. These jigs, like with the rockfish jigs, if you put a little tension, they fall straight down instead of fluttering. So if you know there's no fish in the first 120 feet of the water column or 150 feet, keep a little tension on your spool. That jig's going to sink fast. And then once you get to the depth you want to have it flutter at, take your thumb off, let it be on a free spool, and now it's going to start doing its action. And then when you get down to the bottom, stop. With that type of jig, you can just wind it right back up to where your starting point and drop it again. With the hybrid jigs, you do the jigging action if you want, or use a stop and go retrieve. Most of your bites are going to come on the sink, but some will come retrieving it. Now, you want to have a variety of sizes of the jigs. Here's the 120 gram. I've got the same jig here in the 250 gram. 230 gram, 280 gram hybrid jigs. You want to gauge your jigs the size of the fish you're catching. If it's 20 to 40 pounders, you're more likely to get bites on this than you are on this big thing here. But if it's a bigger fish, they may not even look at this. Or, there's different things that happen. Best thing is ask the crew. Have a variety of sizes of jigs available. Ask the crew. All these tatties have glow on the back. And they come rigged with a double hook with a split ring that you have to attach. So you probably want to get some split ring pliers. When rigging these up, they don't come rigged. They come in a package with the hook separate. Any of these type of jigs, slow pitch, knife jigs, whatever, they always put the weight of the jig at the tail, what they consider to be the tail of the jigs. That's the part that should be opposite of where your line is tied. When I fish knife jigs for rockfish and things like that, I use the hooks at the top. But when fishing for tuna, it's better to have the hooks at the bottom. You're not going to, you put it at the top so you don't snag the bottom when you hit the bottom of the jig. This way these fish, they're just coming in hoovering this whole thing. So the hooks are freer here than they would be attached like this, where they could get the jig stuck or whatever. So that's fish up to 100 pounds. Like I said, if I'm fishing in an area where there's bigger fish around, like they will have later in the season, hopefully you're getting 200 pounders and stuff, you need to step up to some heavier gear here. This is a Tatty's 350 gram hybrid that comes pre-rigged. Well, I'm going to show a picture of this here, just with these hooks and ball bearing swivels and everything, welded rings and all this other stuff, rigged with I think 200 or maybe 250 pound mono. And I mean, you can just tie this right to your Spectra and be ready to go. This type of jig, the nice thing about having all these hooks is you get one of those bigger fish, it's going to have 2 or 3 or 4 of these hooks in its mouth. And talking about that, one of the things that happens with these jigs, and I speak from experience with fishing for everything with them over the years, the fish don't always get a good hook set. So, if you're fly lining a bait with a circle hook and you get bit, and that fish comes tight and you got it in the corner mouth, you got a great hook set on that thing. That tuna is inhaling this thing, and this might just get skin hooked inside of the mouth, or it might catch a very small section of the thing. And if you're fishing with light drag or you're not pulling hard, you might lose that fish 20 or 30 minutes into the battle, but you lost that fish the moment you hooked it. So whenever I fish these types of jigs, I fish a much heavier drag than I would with bait. And what I'll do is I'll immediately put heat on them. Because if they're going to rip off, I want to rip off now. I don't want to waste 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour pulling on a fish that was going to come off anyway. So yeah, you might have some hooks rip out right off the bat, but I'd rather do it right away than drag it out. So yeah, they have, regarding color, there's a lot of bright and wonderful colors, and you know, it really depends on what these fish are feeding on. If they're on fin fish, I'd use a brighter color, you know, and they all have glow. I think the glow plays at some point, but I think just the action of the jig has as big of impact as anything else. There are times though when the fish, like when they're a tanner and they're feeding on squid, a squid color jig with some glow could make a difference in getting bit. Especially, you know, you shine this on the deck lights. You don't need to do it every drop, but you know, if you're in between moves or whatever, just hold it up there for a minute. But the squid color with some bioluminescence could make the difference in getting a bite versus fishing a green or a blue. So there's a lot of brands in the market. Just use one you trust. I've always liked Tatty Lures, so that's why I would choose to, you know, their jigs. And something special about Tatty's is that they saw this fishery happen here, and they actually made jigs, these slow pitch tuna jigs, specifically for this bluefin fishery. I mean, there's nowhere else in the world that they're using a jig that has all this stuff on there. It's this is all designed around these bluefin out here right now. So anyway, get some jigs before you head out. If you have any questions, pick something up at the landing, ask the deckhands, do whatever. Rent heavy tackle if you don't have it. We got good weather in the weekend forecast. Hopefully get out there and catch some fish, and good luck if you're fishing.